It is never the business that fails. It is always the family dynamics, the communication that breaks down. It is all those other things outside of the business that makes it dissolve. Oftentimes, it's like the more successful you become, the more isolated you become. Family businesses are complex, and there is a lot of baggage that people on the outside don't see. Peer groups are they're like secret sauce to growth.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fearless Family Business Show. My name is Adam Hill. I am your host, and it is our goal to help you to strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle of your family business. And today, we're going to talk about something that is synonymous with family business, and that is farming. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about farming, I think about families. I think about families working together, often many generations of families working together on the farm. Family farms are a staple within the United States. They're the backbone of our economy. And today, I'm joined by a guest that has been working with family farms for many, many, many years now. I'm joined by Matt Bose. He's the founder of Agri-Growth Consulting, and Matt specializes in helping farms to develop business growth strategies, diversify their investments, and successfully transition them to the next generation. His focus is on third, fourth, and fifth generation farms, with the sixth generation often already on the way. And with a career spent working with farmers across 7 states and observing the dynamics of family farms within his and his wife's families, Matt brings a wealth of experience and insight into the complex dynamics of family businesses. And this is a great conversation because even if you don't work for a family farm, what we discuss today transcends the farming aspects and just applies to many multi-generational family businesses. And the great thing about what we get into, we talk about these transitions from multi-generational family businesses that have been 5, 6 generations down the line, and how they can apply to any family business, really. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from these very successful businesses and family farms that have existed for generations. And it's a great wide-ranging discussion. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Matt Bose. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Fearless Family Business Show, and welcome to Matt Bose. Thank you so much for being here. I am really excited to talk to you about everything that you're into, because you're into a line of family business that's very specific, but also very broad and very, much part of the American culture and way of life, which is farming. So thanks for being here, and I'm looking forward to digging in.
Yeah, that's great to be here, Adam.
Yeah,
share any insight I have.
Absolutely. Well, I'm interested in the farming aspect because I don't know about you, or I don't know about everybody else, but when I think about farms, I tend to think about family. I tend to think about, the house on the big plot of land where essentially there's a big overlap between what the lifestyle is and what the work is, and so right. It lends itself very well to being a family-oriented business. And naturally, we see that in farming with many businesses that go third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation, which is exactly where your line of work lies. Can you kind of shed some light on why farming and family kind of go hand in hand, and why they're so, why it's so linked to multi-generational family business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is, most of the farms I work with are, I was just thinking the other day, they're fifth generation. They're my age. They're in their 40s, or they're our age, I should say. In a lot of cases, the sixth generation is actually born and is on deck. So it's pretty unique. And a lot of the times it was their great grandfathers that homesteaded the plot of land where their farm started. You'll often hear like it's the home 80 on a farm, and that's where the farm started. 150 years ago or something like that. So it's kind of maybe not that long ago, but 100 years ago. So, but but agriculture is just deeply rooted in people. Once they get that taste of being around the family, getting their hands dirty, being outside, it's a big drawback, and it's not for everybody. And a lot of times when you look at family farms, you may have where back in the day, you used to have a lot of siblings, and that's like my wife's grandpa. He was one of 7 people, but they were having 7 kids because they needed the labor.
Yeah.
they became of age. They became cheap labor. So that's what they did. And so yeah, it's just been ingrained to them forever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting, and a lot of times it creates a lot of problems too. It's almost too ingrained, and it's there's a lot of emotion tied to it, and a lot of pressure tied to it too. So,
by the way, that's a great pun, ingrained into it.
Yeah, you like that?
Community. Yeah,
I'll keep them coming. I'll keep them coming.
We have a special place in our hearts for dad jokes and puns on this show.
Oh yeah,
so.
Oh yeah,
yeah. No, that's great. And you mentioned your wife and kind of the link there into family business, and so you kind of have a family business family. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my, I've been around agriculture. I would say my immediate family. I grew up. My dad was a CEO of an ag bank in central Nebraska. My mom ran an H&R Block franchise. But my dad, my uncles, he came from a farm, left the farm. There was no farm to go back to. But we were always around agriculture. I grew up, worked on a farm and ranch for 9 years, and then spent my whole career in agriculture. My wife's family is deeply rooted in agriculture in Nebraska. Both her dad and her mom's side of the family have farms. Her dad's side of the farm is no longer there. It's there, but somebody else is farming it. And then which would be her mom's side, has a large farm in western Nebraska, large farm, ranch, feedlot, like a true. It's an operation. Like it's always interesting to go out there for like Thanksgiving, and it's just chaos. But,
one of those things where you're basically harvesting your own meal from for Thanksgiving dinner kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like that, but there's always something going. I know it's not. Yeah. There's always some kind of employees going everywhere, and
sure,
cattle getting out, and getting work done before everybody comes home. Goes out and gets their stuff done, and 10 a.m. people come back, and it's just a lot of going on, but they love it, right? And it's I was just thinking the other day, her grandpa died. He almost turned 100. He didn't quite make his 100th birthday, but he would have been on that farm at one time. There would have been 4 generations working on that farm at one time.
Wow.
So that's pretty incredible. You just don't see that very often. And he wasn't actively working, but I mean, he was out there, and just to see, 4 generations working together is something just unique to the business. And again, it's not all perfect either. It's not
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No family business really is, right? I mean, there's always that conflict, and I can imagine I'm sitting here envisioning 4 generations working together. Does that dynamic exist? Because it's like you basically have the home or the family like all in one place living in the area. So it's kind of prone to just, work till you can work no more kind of thing. There's no retirement date. Is that kind of how it works a lot of times?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say it's not there's some of that. There's some of the it's just like any business, the ones that are unsuccessful, like they just have to keep working because they have to keep working.
Right.
Oftentimes it's the other way around, in that they have to keep working because they want to keep working. And that is one of the big things that I see in my business is, and we can talk about identity and being tied to the business. It's the older generation getting out of the way, without getting in the way.
Yeah.
And then the younger generation taking that over. And it doesn't go that smoothly, oftentimes. And it could be a lot of it's, there's several reasons for it, but it doesn't go all that well. And a lot of it's tied to identity.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about that because
Yeah.
I want to hear about identity because
Yeah.
I think that, identity is a big word, of course, now, and
Yep.
it has a lot of different ideas. And in family business, I think in particular, and I certainly can relate to it in
Yep.
where I came from, four generations in a family business. You're trying to find that identity that you have while also maintaining the legacy. What does the identity mean to you, and maybe in farming communities? Where is that crisis happening?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if it's the crisis comes a lot of time in, I was having this conversation with my sister, and
Mm-hmm.
she's a doctor, and she was really hurt during COVID. Like there was a lot of like pain and like people wouldn't take their advice and just a lot of that emotion. And I was like,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about it, and I said, like my job, I was a salesman for a chemical company. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
people don't take my advice every day. And you know what? I don't care. I go home and it's no big deal to me. But I said, farmers are the same way. Their identity is tied to their operations. I said, doctors, and same with you. Like your name
Mm-hmm.
literally changes to your occupation. So it's like that is, if we don't think about that in life,
Yeah.
if you have a family business that has your last name, um, it's directly tied to you. And so my sister is a endocrinologist, and she was like, "That's interesting." She said, "She's like, I have like 25 people that come through my office every day.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 people that I know their occupations in life." She said, "I know the farmers, I know the priest or the clergy," and she said, "The last one is I know professional athletes." She's
Oh
like,
yeah.
if they didn't do any of those 3 occupations, like farmers, clergy, and professional athletes or high level college athletes, she's like, I had no clue what they do for a living."
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that really made me think like, oh yeah. And I'm sure it'd go too, if you had your own family business that was the Johnson, whatever, something that's tied to you,
Right.
would be tied to you down. So that's what really got me thinking about like, that's a lot of the reasons why it's so hard. It's just because we tie identity ourselves and externally too. People
Mm-hmm.
introduce us as, you know, my son has a couple friends in his class. Their dad were professional athletes. It's like, oh yeah, there's Gage's dad. He played
Yeah.
professional football. Like, that's,
Right.
it's just tied to it. And then, so yeah, I think that's a lot of the issue of once that's gone, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you have? What are you tied to anymore? And yeah, so that's a lot of the struggles.
I could see that the identity and that's a great example. I love how you framed it with like doctors or professional athletes and farmers in particular, because I think if you may not be in the farming community, which I'm not, you wouldn't necessarily make that connection that the identity is tied to the occupation, but you can definitely see how that's true.
Yep.
And I can kind of maybe connect the dots that when that's the case, leaving the family business later is going to be very difficult. When you've built your identity around it.
Right.
So that's what you've tried to help people with in that transition. Is that right?
Yeah. And I've, not necessarily, I don't try to help the people transitioning out. It's usually the generation that is a little bit frustrated with it. Like, hey, I can't, like my dad is just meddling in the business still. Like, I had a customer of mine and he said, he's like, I need some help. My dad is retired. He's fully retired, has all the money he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
Him and my mom will not, like, they're trying to contribute to the farm and like, they don't need to be there. It's like, like, what do I do? How do I get them? So I built, I interviewed a couple people that had transitioned out. I was like, how do you do this? Or like, how do you, without hurting their feelings? And so the 3 things that kind of talked about is one is, which was interesting. Like you said, like treat the older people like that are transitioning out. She's like, treat them like a teenager. She's like, give them reverse tasks that you would give somebody coming up in the business. She's like, give them less risky tasks. Like, don't give them, they want to be involved. They want to have a sense of worth still. And they're a lot of value, you know, in regular business. Like, don't let them set the budget
Yeah.
for the whole business, but let them do, you know, get the task easier and easier as they go. They have a lot of value to give,
Right.
you know, and if they don't have something to do, they're going to find something to do generally. So that was interesting that she said too. She's like, I treated grandpa like a reverse teenager. Like, we no longer threw him in a combine, you know, $500,000, $1 million combine, and said, like, go for it. Or, you know, with a bunch of liability, we said, hey, Wilbur, like, the waters need checked. The fence needs checked. Then he was more than happy. You know, he was like, yeah. And they know, they're too, there's like, I just want to contribute. The second thing she really brought up too is that, like, old people love information. And when they don't get that information, especially in a business that they grew, they will find it any way they can. And meddling is the easiest way to just say it. Like, if they're not included in business meetings, kind of the day to day, they're going to find a way they're going to get their nose in it, and they're going to figure out, like, what's going on in the day to day. So the more you give them information, the better chance you have of them, not staying away. That's kind of the bad way to put it, but not, you know, just messing things up completely.
Yeah.
So yeah, give them that. And the third thing is, just realize you're not going to change them. You know, you're not going to, they're going to pick up, you know, at 65, 70 years old, they're not going to pick up a golf habit. They're not going to find an RV and just decide that they want to travel the world. Like, that's, they're happy. They were happy growing a business. That might be their happiest they've ever been, is just continuing their life, contributing in any way they can to the business. So don't think you're going to change them. At that point, it's just, you have to work with them. So, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the identity that you're talking about seems like it's more aligned with helping the younger, the next generation, really just kind of ease their frustration by helping the older generation, you know, come to terms with the identity as they grow into that next phase of life.
Right.
How do you, and is there a, within the farming community, I know, and I mean, this is great information because it applies, I think, to all types of family businesses.
Right.
I mean, when you have like founder generations or generations that are building into the companies, they want to be involved, and and I think our tendencies maybe as the next generation is to either try to force them out or exclude them, or you know, not share, but some kind of mechanism for that inclusion. Do you find that is there some kind of family charter or template that you try to help people work through to organize that kind of I guess transition, if you will?
I don't know if there's generally there's a lot of family charters that people have. I mean, the easiest way to do it is really like an active family business meeting once a year. Simple as that is, not a board meeting, but a family business meeting. There's a difference. And just to execute on that, and to have all the shareholders kind of on the same page within the family. And, you know, when you get into, you know, fourth, fifth, sixth generation, there can be a lot of shareholders, and there can be shareholders that are, I don't know, absentee shareholders, and those that are actively in operations. And so I think that's just that family meeting to sit down and say, like, here's the plan, and here's what we're working on. Here's what we're going forward. Because you know, the interesting thing about farm transitions, those ones that are successful. I just interviewed a guy that just transitioned out, super successful, like did everything right to my eyes from the outside until I interviewed him. I was like, oh, and I was like, well, how did you do this? And he was like, Matt, he walked me back 40 years, and he's like, well, started with this event. And I was like he wasn't going to let me fast forward. He was like, that's that's when we started this transition. It was 40 years ago. And we worked on it, actively for 40 years. We had one big event where it was like a, focused event. He's like, we were actively working on it for 40 years. And it was changing and evolving. And I was like, that's how we did it successfully, which shocked me. That's I was like, it's pretty impressive. But he did it successfully. I mean, he transitioned a large operation out smoothly. Just did it like textbook, like perfect. And it just took a ton of time. But so they did it over a long time.
That's incredible. I love that you say that with regard to one of the experiences that you remember as far as being a good transition, and that it lasted decades. Yeah. In addition to just being like the fact that it was 40 years in the making, what were some of the elements of that transition that helped make it successful? Like if you could think of a few.
Yeah. So he told me the story of, when they had a strategic person come in, similar to what I do, and they spent 2 days, around the table, like no work on the farm, just straight up farm transition. Like what, what are we going to do? And he said, I remember he had 2 nephews in the meeting, and he said, we were going through this whole operation, and he's like, I remember my nephew like stopped the meeting, like halfway through it the first day, and was like, went and drew up on the board and said, drew 3 lines on the board and said, Grandpa brought the business to here. You guys brought it here, which is one step higher. He's like, the expectation is that we are going to take the business here, which is one step higher. And he's like, we aren't ready yet. He's like, I'm not ready to do that. And so he's like, we didn't even think that they weren't ready. And so he's like, it really, that's what our focus was for the next 5 years, is to get those 2, to circle back and say like, oh man, like we really had a blind spot on this. We just figured that they were immersed in the operation. Like you would just pick it up by osmosis. And he's like, we were completely wrong on that. And he's like, if those 2 or one of them wouldn't have spoke up, he's like, I don't know what would have happened, like thankfully he did. And it's like, we got them the resources. They started doing their own business and all those things. But yeah, I think that's important too, is to really ask that next generation, like, are you ready? Do you want it? I mean, that's usually the first question for the next generation, is like, do you want this? Is this what you want?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want it? Are you ready?
Do you want it?
Yeah.
Right. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Do you want it, or is it implied? And that's worst case scenario, right? That's, where it's like an implied, like, oh, we got to keep this thing going. So,
yeah. And that's a lot of self-awareness too, from the next generation to basically say like, we're not ready. We need preparation. And I think there's so much power in and there's a lot of nuance, I imagine, in that scenario too, that probably dates back 40 years, in the fact that, you have that open communication where the next generation can speak up and say, we're not ready, we need this. Yeah. And that's a huge dynamic too.
Yeah. And I would say most of the time it's the other way around. It's the next generation's like, I mean, we're egotistical males a lot of times, like, no, like I got this is like I get my dad out of the way, like I can grow this business. And especially you're in your 30s or early 40s, you think you got it all figured out, and you jump in, and 4 years later you're like, boy, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I think that happens more than the other way around. I don't know, maybe you speak from your experience on it, but that's the way I usually see it too. And the people I work with too, they've been trying to manage it for a few years, and they get to the point where they're like, I need help. Like, it's too much to bear on my own. And I got to find people to help me.
Yeah. And I think from the experience that I had, there was certainly that it was like, I it's easy to underestimate the responsibility and some of the things that you're not ready to be prepared for. I think better preparation. There's things that you don't know
Right.
that you wish you knew. Like I wish I knew the the weight that it would feel. Just the weight of it and
Yeah.
how relationships would change.
Right.
Or just what I might need to be prepared for. It's just I think that I feel like that dynamic of just being able to be open and having that communication of here's what we need, and even like two-way. It's like here's what we're going to expect of you to know in order to take it over, and here's
Yep.
what and then reverse is true as well.
Yeah.
It's a very humbling experience.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's another thing where those that are transitioning out can't start it too quick. I
Yeah.
mean, they can, to transferring those skills over. That's one of the things I see. It's just they wait too long. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm trying to retire in 2 years, and we're gonna jam all this in. Try to do that, and it's in all reality, it takes longer than that
Yeah.
to transfer
Yeah.
those skills. And yeah,
What are some of the ways that you've seen are the best, are the things that people might miss in terms of preparation for the next generation? Like where do we tend to miss the boat? And, speaking from the experience of farming, I mean, I think that may apply to other businesses as well, but I'm just curious to know if there's anything that you commonly see that people wish they knew, or people wish they were prepared for before taking over the business.
that's a great. I mean, I think there's so many of those that you can't know until you get into it and mess it up.
Yeah.
And you just that's sometimes that's the only way you can do it. You can't
Yeah.
you're never prepared to do it.
Mhm.
One of the things that I am pretty passionate about too is talking with one of the things I think people overlook in it is modeling of
Mhm.
like when you pass something on, I always say like a farm is your kid's first business school, or
Mhm.
a chemical company is your kid's first business school. Like before they do any kind of education, they've probably been educated around the family business.
Yeah.
And that's both good and bad. And a lot of times that modeling, say it can be good and bad, but it needs to be broken a little bit too. It's just too much of the same. So you really need people around you to kind of break that modeling and say like, everything you've learned over your lifetime might not be right. Here's a different way to look at it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I think people overlook. And in discussion too, a lot of times I see, just because I deal with mainly males in this business, but like two brothers
Mhm.
that are fighting with each other, oftentimes a lot of it is just that they have the same modeling growing up, and they see things, they just can't see it any other way, and it just creates a lot of conflict. So I think
Mhm.
that's one of the things, just I wish people knew, is just to find people that could offer outside perspective outside of the family business, and quickly.
Mhm.
That's one of the big things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point that kind of gets into something that we talked about on our pre-call, which is the value of communities.
Yeah.
And, you and I are both part of the same,
Yep.
mastermind group, GoBundance.
Yep.
And that's how we've met. And, I think for many businesses that might be a little easier for people to jump into a community of like-minded entrepreneurs, like locally or something like that. But I imagine, like we were talking about in the farming community, where you're kind of this open space, this like maybe this isolated unit that it hasn't been as easy traditionally to find that community. So
Right.
Can you speak to that a little bit, like the value of community versus the difficulty of finding it? Or
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where often I work in a commoditized business,
Mhm.
and you are truly competing against your neighbor. And oftentimes it's like the more successful you become, the more isolated you become.
Yeah.
It's not, it sounds backwards, but it is. It's like no one wants to lift you up when you don't need, when you're ahead of everybody else.
Right.
I had a customer of mine he was like, Matt, when I came back to the farm, he's like, I had some buddies. He's like, we'd meet every Friday night for beers. We'd talk about how we were growing our operations. He's like, life was good. It's like, we were all going to take over the world together. And he did take over the world, not the world, but he's like, I don't get those phone calls anymore. It's like, they're still going and doing things together, but they're not calling me. And, so, that's like, wow, that's interesting, Greg, that, now you have to find your own community. And oftentimes it's got to be a ways away. Like say we're part of a peer group mastermind. When they function correctly, they're vulnerable, and you are telling things to people that, like probably no one else knows in this world. And like, you can't do that unless you have you can't do that in your local community. You can't talk about, how you may have a marital problems or, mental illness that's in your family that no one knows about, or, addiction. It's not all that dramatic, but there's a lot of just family businesses are complex, and there is a lot of baggage that people on the outside don't see. And so it's like, how do you find those communities to grow together where you let the environment, not the effort, really lift everybody up? And peer groups are just, they are they're like secret sauce to growth. That's my take on them. I think they should be outlawed against others who aren't in them, because there's something special about a properly facilitated peer group.
Yeah.
It's pretty special.
Absolutely. I'll say from my experience working in a family business, I never knew that was, going back to kind of the last statement of what I wish I was better prepared for. I think if, to your point about not being in a peer group should be illegal for business leaders. I think that it's just like that should be just a rite of passage into leadership is finding the right community of people that can have the right combination of mentorship, cohort, and and vulnerability that you talk about. It's so huge to find that in where we did. Yeah.
I'm going to steal that. I love that. That should be written into a transition plan of like, here's what you're going to do. Like, we are going to put funds aside, and you're going to be involved in something outside of your normal circles. It should be. It is. They're powerful. And one of the things that it's kind of shocking to me within a peer group is, like, properly facilitated, everybody's giving value to others with nothing expected in return. That's just not how society works. And it's somewhat uncomfortable sometimes too, being like, why are they pouring into me? Like, why, this person is 10 steps ahead of me. They are, worth a massive amount of money, but they really care about providing value for me and my growth. And they don't expect anything in return. And that's unique.
Yeah.
And you often see, when you get that in normal life, when somebody pours into you, it's like, okay, what's the ask? What's coming?
Right.
Right. What's what's coming? And that's pretty powerful.
That's so true. It's really hard to kind of break yourself from that feeling of like, okay, well, what's the expectation? What's the what does this person want in return? But yeah, it really is. If it works well, and honestly, it probably is very hard to make it work as well as, like, maybe GoBundance makes it work. But when it does, you get that value add without the expectation of anything in return, and you give the value, and it just works out really well. Is there anything like that in the farming community that you found as far as peer groups that?
There's a few out there that are somewhat informal.
Yeah.
And I'm actively putting one together right now. Because I've seen the power, and it's like, man, they're not for everybody.
Right.
But for those specific people that are ready to grow and have come to the end of their road in their local communities,
Mm-hmm.
it's a powerful tool. And, you're going to leave others in the dust. And, one of the concerns is too, you might even leave your community in the dust too.
Sure.
When you grow, that's hard to say, but a lot of times you grow and you look back and you're like, man, I don't know if I fit in here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't, but that's better than going the other way around. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty passionate about them. And I loved it. I loved it. Just so many people that have achieved a lot in life were members of some kind of peer group. They just don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subject that is, it's hard to talk about with people. And you're like, oh, what'd you do last weekend? And you're like, oh, I went to Madison with some guys, like
Right.
a men's group. Like, what men's group? And you're like, I can't even get into this right now. It's
right.
like, I'm not gonna. I don't know if you find that too. It's like,
oh yeah.
It's like, how do I describe this?
Yeah.
Are we just like some tribal? Are we painting ourselves up and beating on our chest and doing? I don't know what. But yeah,
it's true. Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a stigma. Like, I mean, like maybe a broader stigma, or maybe it's a perceived stigma. Maybe, I think everybody has a community. Everybody desires a community, yep. But specifically, I think in business, maybe why it's hard and why I've found it hard to kind of be open about it is it's like, I think this is why I wanted to put this show together for the specific, like, next generation people who are coming up in the business, because things start to get lonely when you start to make your way into leadership roles in the family business.
Right.
Again, relationships change and you start to feel more alone, and you don't really have a lot of outlets to talk to other people about the unique challenges without it's just, whomever in his ivory tower or whatever. But it's like, no, there's real challenges. There's mental health issues, like you were saying, in the family. There's a lot of weight, and those communities can help with that for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And it's, I don't know why I just never, till I started listening to people that actually had other businesses.
Mm-hmm.
When you listen to other people, they're talking about growing and scaling and EBITDA and selling in, 10 years for a multiple and all those things. And it's like, man, a lot of those don't apply to the family business. You're not looking to exit in 10 years. You're looking to see if if you can make a viable business that maybe your kids will take over. You might have to sell it in farming. You're going to have to sell it at a discount to what it's really worth to pass it on to them. And so they have unique set of circumstances around them, and they mix in family. So for sure.
Yeah. Well, what are some of those? You mentioned kind of the idea of trying to sell it outside. So I mean, like, obviously, maybe that lends itself better to transitioning to a next gen business and keeping it in the family. But what are some of the challenges that you see farms facing, like family farms facing now, uniquely?
I mean, right now it's a commoditized business. I mean, some of the things that I see, I'm gonna say, like, and I learned this from a guy that I studied under, and he's been doing this for 40 years in the family business. And he said, like, without exception, it is never the business that fails. It is always the family dynamics, the communication that breaks down. It is all those other things outside of the quote unquote business that makes it dissolve. And he's done it for 40 years. So he's like, you can't focus on those things. And it's not your marketing efforts. It's not your sales efforts. More than likely it's going to be a family dynamic. It's going to be something like that blows it up. So those are the struggles, and that's unsexy, right? There's no, Grant Cardone's and not selling books on family business relationships and how to get along with your sister who lives in San Francisco now, but is a shareholder in the business still, and husband is, he's not selling books like that, and
Right.
they're just, but that's the part that'll blow up a family business for sure.
Yeah, I love that, because I have to repeat that what you just said, because that's so important. It's never it's never really the business that fails. It's the family dynamics that really force it, the dissolution.
Yep.
That's so true. That's such a great point. I love that you're building a community, or that you're working on a community specifically for farming family businesses.
Yeah.
Because I feel like those communities, when you build them like in the right niche, it offers that ability to have that vulnerability. So I think that's great. And if you're listening and you're working in a farm, or and you'd like to, or just generally just need help with a lot of these transitions, or you're in the next gen business, reach out to Matt regarding that, and stay connected. I know he's we'll give his email out in a bit. It's hello@mattbose.com. But yeah, but that's a great way to get started. So as far as managing some of those personalities, we're talking, like we talked a little bit about that a few minutes ago, about some of the conflict that happens. I know you're kind of big on personality testing. How do you usually use that in a family business environment? What do you usually recommend?
So I've always used, I've been part of a couple corporations and used, personality testing. I think they're more important in a family business, because you don't get to per se pick your team or put your team together. Oftentimes when you look at it's put together for you.
Yes.
You don't get to hire, you don't get to hire that person that's like, oh, there's no unicorn teams out there in a family business. A lot of times they're just like, okay, this is my brother, and this is me, and this is my dad, and this is my mom. And we didn't hire these people. They're just here. Yeah. And so as simple as it is, the DISC personality test, if you're going to do any of them, that one's my favorite. It's like I call it like the Leatherman of personality tests. Like, it's not great at anything, but it's good at everything. And it's a good base, and a proper, just having that part of your culture, your company culture, I think is important for everybody. I would have every single employee, have some personality test and just make it part of your culture. It's going to help your communication, teamwork, and productivity. I'm 100%. I say I've managed a sales team around, and I knew everybody's DISC personality all the time. I had it on an iPad, and it helped me out immensely. And so, just sitting down and thinking about, man, it's a lot of times it takes somebody's outside perspective, but it's like just having this conflict between two people. And it's like, what is it? And a lot of times you just lay out, I had two salesmen at one time. They just butted heads. And actually I got a phone call from my boss one night, or a text message at like 9:00 at night. And he's like, forward me an email. And he's like, hey, you take care of this tomorrow morning, with an exclamation point. And it was two of my salesmen had things blown up between them, and they went over my head to my boss, things you don't want to have as a manager.
Right.
And, went out there and sat down with the two of them and laid out their DISC personalities, and they were complete opposites of the spectrum. And it was like, hey, you two, neither one of you's right. You don't see eye to eye because you are two completely different people. And let's just get this out here and look at each other's, and we're going to have to deal with it. And, I'd be lying to you if I was like, oh, everything was just perfect after that. That was some kumbaya moment where it was like, they lived in harmony, but it was manageable. It was workable from that point forward. There was no more text messages going to my boss. And they respected each other, and it worked. And so oftentimes that's all we can expect in a family business, is just again, not to blow things up or get derailed or fly off the rails. It's just like we can work together. And so I love those tests, and say just because it's pretty easy to interpret. A lot of times spouses have probably done it at their work, or people have been exposed to it, but a ton of them out there. Utilize one of them, make it part of your culture. Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah. That's a big deal. I mean, it can at least, at the very least, create some awareness of how people operate, and that can maybe not avoid the conflict, but mitigate it a bit. It sounds like so. That's a good thing. Yeah. If you have some from your experience working with these multi-generational family farms, I mean, you're talking third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation, where they're getting into sixth generation now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's nuts. I mean, so what are some of the, like, if you had just maybe like a couple of takeaways that you could provide for just any other family business that's maybe in the first or second looking to transition to their kids, what would you suggest they start like with at that point? What are like the big pitfalls that you see now, many generations down the line, that hopefully these younger generation companies might avoid?
And I would just say that I think the biggest pitfall is to make sure your kids are happy and it's something that they want to do, that they have a desire for. It's not your your desire to make the business go on from one generation to the next. It's all right. It's all right for businesses not to go on. A lot of times they don't, and that's fine. And a lot of times, like, family farms shouldn't go on. It creates, you get into a sixth generation farm. Do you want to be the person that undoes what 5 generations did before you? Or you want to be the person that's like, I can't, 5 people did this successfully before me, but now I can't be the one that builds it and passes to the next one. There's an immense amount of pressure that's involved in that. And so, I would think that's just, make sure your kids, it's something that they want to do. It's not just your legacy that you're like, man, I want to see this name be used for the next 100 years. It's like, make sure it's something that they're happy with and skills that they possess. And I would also say, one of the things I had a guy tell me too, he was talking about passing on his farm to his 2 sons. And he said, one of my sons is an employee. That's all he'll ever be. He will not be a shareholder. And he said, I don't know where he got his statistics, but he said 2 in 10. He's like, I heard one time that 2 in 10 people are capable of being managers. He's like, I have 2 sons. He's like, what are the odds that I won the genetic lottery with those 2 sons, and that they both can do this? They both can manage this.
Yeah.
That, I would say, that is the, like, don't put blinders on.
Sure.
Don't be like, if your kids can't manage it, they can't manage it. Hire somebody, bring in a outside people, let them be employees, let them sell, let them do something else. But say you probably didn't win the genetic lottery. So just don't think that's going to happen. So,
well, I think that's great advice, because I know that, especially the more generations you get down the line, the more entrenched you get in the idea that this has to go on. And that knowing that at all times you have that freedom to sell and to just take your chips out and divert and put them elsewhere when things might not be working. That there's so much freedom in that. Not just for ownership, but for the leaders. There's so much freedom in that. And to the other point, it's like, being clear with your kids early that, they don't have to be that, and maybe they're not even the right fit for that. And I'd love to know if you have any perspective on how to maybe kindly or without, I guess, being too harsh or anything, like how do you communicate that with your kids, that maybe they're not the best fit to take over the company?
I don't know. I don't know if I have any insight into that. I don't know if I really have, like, I think generally they know. Like they're just
Yeah.
they're not cut out for it. I would say one of the things too that I think when you look at family businesses, a lot of times they don't diversify their investments enough outside of the business, and it becomes where, I mean, this is kind of complete. You were talking about things that they don't do well, but it's like there's too much investment put in the business, and then it doesn't provide you any freedom to do anything else anyway, other than sell out the whole thing and do something else. So, that's one of the things I see too, is like, function like a family office a little bit more, where you're taking some of that income and you're investing it outside the business, creating some wealth, some different wealth avenues out there rather than just the ones you have internally. I would say that'll alleviate, just gives you options in it.
Yeah. I love that idea. That idea that you kind of think of it as soon as it's viable to do so, just think of it as a family office.
Yeah.
I love that idea. That's and I think I feel like more family businesses are starting to think that way as far as the enterprise rather than just the business.
Yeah.
That's great advice. And go ahead.
So another thing that does, is it creates, when you start thinking about, and I learned this from a couple businesses that I worked with that were large family businesses, like huge ones. They always had a family ROI. And if things didn't meet that ROI, it was like, we weren't going to do it. Their ROIs were like 20 some percent. They were giant businesses. Yeah. And so it was like, if you didn't bring something to the table that was, 20%, it's like the family wasn't going to do it. And, I always thought I always liked that, I was like, oh yeah, this frames all of our decisions that we make. It takes the emotion out of like, oh God, I would just really love a new delivery truck. I don't know why, just make things better. It's like, no, what is the ROI here? What are we talking about? And could we position those assets better somewhere else? So
yes. That's a great point. I love that. Treating it like an EOS business or like, having a scorecard. I love that idea. No, that's great advice. And for anybody that, that's listening that may be owning a multi-generational family business or farm, and working, reach out to Matt. This is the world he lives in and is the expert in, and he can help you with it. How are you helping people, Matt, within that world, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so people can find me. You send me an email at hello@mattbose.com. Visit my website, mattbose.com. I'm actively putting together peer groups here, focused around kind of the unique cycle of agriculture, and also do like some one-on-one farm transitioning, and also just growing a business. So always looking for opportunities and how to best serve the marketplace. So anything anybody needs out there, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'll be glad to answer.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. That was really great. Yeah, if you want to reach out, it's hello@mattbose.com, and that's spelled MATTBOOS.com. And thank you so much for being here. This was really enlightening, and I think a lot of what you were talking about with regard to family farms applies to so many different family businesses altogether. You're speaking our language. So thanks for being here, Matt.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Adam. I appreciate it.
All right. And everyone else, thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe if you like this episode, and also share with a friend if you know someone who might benefit from this. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Fearless Family Business Show. If you're enjoying this show, please thumbs up this episode and subscribe wherever that subscribe button is. And you'll get more family business education and insights in your inbox. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, a colleague, a spouse, your mom, your dad, a second cousin, whomever you think might benefit from hearing this show. And if you're in a family business and you've got a great story to share, contact me, because I would love to see if you'd be a great fit for this show, I'd love to interview you. Or if you're struggling in your family business to find your unique identity or voice, or you need an injection of new life into your family business, I'd also love to hear from you. I'd love to learn more about you, and I'd love to see if I can help. Simply email me at adam@fearlessfamilybusiness.com, and we'll get you connected to the right place. Together, we can elevate the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle we all experience in our family businesses. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.